Hello, dear listener. I am so glad you decided to join me here this evening. As you can see, we're doing things a little differently tonight, and for the next few episodes of the podcast. Like so many others, I have fond memories of sitting by a campfire and swapping spooky stories. I thought it would be fun to take some time away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Wander out into these beautiful, secluded woods and share some stories with you all that I feel would be best told around a campfire, with no other distractions to take away from these creepy stories. Every episode will have a general theme, which I will share with you. And you may even hear some familiar voices come and join me by the campfire to share some tales of their own. So come, join me as we delve into these stories, as Tapes of Trepidation presents the Campfire Sessions. As we begin the first session, let's focus on what's in front of us for a moment. There are so many strange, captivating, and terrifying tales that have taken place by the light of a campfire. They say folk stories are how we transmit transcendent truths across generations. The quintessential American folk story is the campfire tale. The pedagogical value of this tradition is opaque. We usually think of them only as scary stories for kids. After having a peculiar experience, I believe there is more to be gleaned if you look. There's a certain backcountry area about an hour and a half from my hometown where campgrounds seem to grow like weeds. Besides park and conservation area campsites, there are at least a couple dozen full camping complexes operated by various churches, schools, and organizations, all within about 40,000 acres. This area has a campfire ghost story that seems to be particular to it. I stayed at 3 different overnight activity camps around there as a kid. 1 Cub Scouts camp, 1 Junior Achievement camp, and a for-profit summer camp. At all 3, I heard some version of the story told around a bonfire. I also overheard it being told at a neighborhood fire pit when my family stayed at a park resort around there. I never heard it at any of the other various scouting camps I went to. And I found no evidence that the legend exists outside that little camping micro-community. The essentials are that a young girl at one of the local camps was playing recklessly around the bonfire and fell in, face first. She presumably died, and now walks the fields and back roads at night, her horribly burnt face visible to any who crosses her path. That's pretty much it. The standard telling doesn't mention her actually doing anything to people besides scaring them. Yet the story managed to freak me out as a kid more than any other campfire tale. Burning was one of my biggest childhood fears. Not just burning of my own body, but the idea of witnessing someone else burn. To have your face burnt off seemed worse than death itself. Would life even be worth living after something like that? It didn't help that this story, at least the part about the girl falling face first into the fire, felt like a true one. My mom once mentioned that she heard about something like that at a Girl Scout camp in the area when she was young. My enthusiasm for communal camping continued into my teens. I heard the story as an assistant camp counselor a couple of times. Then in college, I started volunteering with a camp for troubled preteen boys. At a fall weekend retreat with this organization, I decided the story of the girl who fell into the campfire and burned her face would be a good way to discourage horseplay. There were about a dozen youths at this retreat, and almost as many camp counselors and chaperones. We gathered around the fire pit surrounded by woodland and had some group bonding time. When it came time to tell scary stories, I went last. I relayed the story of Sarah Silverstein, the name I decided to give the poor girl, with Vever, being sure to pantomime key moments. My telling of the story had all the dramatic bits I had heard over the years. The girl's stubborn refusal to listen to camp counselors, her tragic death as a result of the burning, and her lich-like haunting of the woods and roads with her sooty, disfigured face. The wind even picked up during my performance, adding to the ambience. When I finished, the boys just stared in stunned silence. I think I killed the mood for the rest of the night. After an uncomfortable silence, one of the other counselors made a joke, and the tension somewhat broke. Still, the kids had a subdued demeanor as we wrapped up and returned to the facilities for the night. That night, I had a terrible nightmare. It was my first dream about the campfire girl in years. Some of it involved encountering her on the road or in the woods. But most of it was just me being forced to watch her falling into the fire. Over and over. In the morning, we set off in the camp minibus for a museum trip. It was raining. Despite my nightmare, I was relaxed. Then the bus had radiator trouble, and we had to stop on a gravel back road barely 3 miles from camp. We called a tow truck, but it was expected to take at least an hour and a half to arrive. By now, the weather was getting really bad. The road was lightly wooded on either side, and I started to worry that a tree might fall on the minibus. According to Google Maps, there was a camp just under a mile away. It was a church camp, and the app didn't say it was closed. I tried calling the listed number, but my reception dropped at that moment. Fearing the weather would deteriorate further, I volunteered to make a dash for it and see if there was anyone who could help us, while another adult made the 3-mile journey back to our camp to get his personal vehicle. The journey took me down the gravel road in a ways, but a paved 2-lane road, then another gravel road. I had to cut across a field to avoid a creek flooding. The storm started to break as I came in view of the gate to the church camp. Finding the gate unlocked, I pushed past it and walked toward what looked like to be the administrative building. I noted that they had their own bus parked outside. After I rang the doorbell a couple of times, an elderly woman answered. "Oh dear, you're soaked," was the first thing she said. I chuckled slightly, then explained the situation. "Oh yes, come in, she hastened. I hung up my rain suit on a coat rack just inside the door at her direction. She briefly said something about preparing for an incoming group of campers the next weekend before asking me to go over my story again. She asked if I would like her husband to take us back to our camp in their bus. I was about to say yes, but then I remembered the main road was flooded. She said that there was another way around that didn't have any streams. When I accepted her offer, she sat down at the desk and picked up a walkie-talkie. "Hey, John?" She spoke into it. "There's a man here from the reform camp. He says their bus broke down and they need help. Can you come to the office?" I heard the man say he was on his way. She explained that he was on the other side of the camp and would be a minute, then asked if I would like some coffee. The woman's face was discolored in several places. There was scar tissue around her cheeks and nose and darkened skin covering much of her neck. There are some spots that looked like they were once blisters. Still, she had gentle eyes and a warm smile. I smiled back as I accepted her offer. "Yes, that would be great. Thank you very much." Friend of the show and horror narrator Kai Fayden now joins us by the campfire to share a story about the time he and some friends spent a night in the forest.
8 years ago, some friends and I decided to tell spooky stories around the campfire. We had always wanted to make a fire outside and hang out at night, but we were too young to go by ourselves, especially after midnight. That year, things were different. We were no longer children, we thought, so we somehow convinced our parents to let us stay out late. We didn't tell them about the fire, obviously. Once we had all gathered in front of my house, we only had to think of a good place to hang out so that our parents wouldn't find out about the fire. We ended up making the fire near a small dirt road out by the forest, leading straight to the riverside. The setup was great. A creepy forest, the sound of the flowing river, crickets chirping, and the scary sight of an abandoned stone house in the background. It was a rather warm night for that time of year, and the moon was shining over the forest, casting strangely shaped shadows on the walls of the abandoned house. It was quite unsettling when you caught a glimpse of a moving shadow out of the corner of your eye. By the time we had finished making the fire, the moon had moved slightly and the shadows were gone, a thing which brought us a bit of relief. We had found a slab of stone next to the river, and we used it as a makeshift stage in front of the fire for the storytellers to stand on while narrating their creepy tales. We took our flashlights out of our backpacks and started. A few stories in, it was finally my turn. So I grabbed my flashlight and headed towards the stage. I had just started my scary story when, all of a sudden, it was freezing cold. The flashlight turned itself off, and the wind started blowing violently, putting out the fire. I panicked and kept slapping my flashlight in the hope of turning it back on. Assuming it was a joke of mine, but still unsettled by the whistling of the wind, everybody instinctively reached for their flashlights. But none of them worked. Overwhelmed by fear, I slowly headed back towards the group. The light of the moon was no longer visible either. It was like something just filled the area with darkness, or rather, sucked all of the light out of it, if that makes any sense. As I was walking without being able to see anything, I tripped on a rock and fell on the ground. The flashlight fell right next to my face. As my friends approached me, the flashlight suddenly turned back on, illuminating the front of the abandoned house. That's when we saw it. A little, fair-headed doll. Its pigtails adorned with red dotted ribbons, all covered in what looked like blood, was standing on the window ledge. We all freaked out, and the girl started screaming when the doll simply fell out of the window for no reason whatsoever, followed by a weird metallic screech as it hit the ground. We had no choice but to grab our backpacks and run home. After a few days, a couple of older friends of ours came with us to investigate the house. They were clearly amused by our silly ghost story and didn't take us seriously. We searched for hours, yet we found nothing there. However, when we were walking down the path leading to our abandoned campsite, we saw a trail of dried blood drops leading just off the main path into the thicket. The droplets grew further and further apart, and we eventually lost track of them. Shortly after that, a wolf howled at the moon, and judging by its loudness, it seemed to be quite close. As we were rushing back to the path, one of our older friends tripped over something and fell face first into the dirt. We saw a red dotted ribbon next to his face, quite similar to the ones the doll had. As we dug through the hard gravel, we came across a hand. A little girl's hand, covered in dry blood.
For the final story this evening, we joined several friends who traveled to Northern Ontario's Algonquin Park, which is not too far from us actually, where they experience the terrifying sound of the Wendigo's call. We thought a camping trip in Northern Ontario's wilderness would be fun. The 6 of us, Tom, Liz, Sarah, Mike, Danny, and I, had been friends since high school. On the first night, we gathered around the campfire, sharing ghost stories. Tom, ever the prankster, told us about the Wendigo, a malevolent spirit from Algonquin legend that turns humans into insatiable cannibals. We laughed it off, but the dense forest around us seemed to whisper warnings. The second night, strange calls began. They were distant at first, echoing through the trees. Long, mournful howls that sent chills down my spine. "Probably wolves," Mike said, but he sounded uneasy. We huddled closer to the fire, the shadows dancing menacingly on the trees. By the third night, the howls were closer. Tom and Danny decided to investigate despite our protests. They grabbed flashlights and headed into the darkness, leaving us by the fire. Hours passed. We called out for them, but the forest swallowed our voices. When they finally returned, something was off. Their eyes were wild, their clothes torn. "We didn't see anything," Tom said shakily. Danny just nodded, staring into the fire as if he could see something we couldn't. We exchanged worried glances, but said nothing. The fourth night, Liz went missing. She'd gone to collect firewood and never came back. Panic set in. We searched the forest, calling her name until our voices were hoarse. There was no trace of her. Tom and Danny grew more erratic. They whispered to each other in hushed tones, casting paranoid glances our way. It felt like they were hiding something, but fear kept us silent. On the fifth night, the howls turned into screams. Agonizing human screams that echoed in our ears long after they faded. We were terrified, huddled together in the tent, clutching each other. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The next morning, Mike was gone. His sleeping bag lay empty, the zipper torn open as if he had been dragged out. Tom and Danny insisted we move camp, but their eyes gleamed with something sinister. I realized then, too late, that they were no longer my friends. They were something else. Something hungry. That night, Sarah and I stayed awake, listening to the howls. We planned to leave at first light, but they attacked before dawn. Tom and Danny, or whatever they'd become, came for us with an insatiable hunger in their eyes. We fought, but it was no use. I managed to escape, running blindly through the forest, the screams of my friends echoing behind me. I stumbled upon a ranger station at dawn, exhausted and delirious. The rangers found me raving about the Wendigo. They never found my friends. Sometimes, late at night, I hear those mournful calls, and I know they're still out there, hunting. And I know one day, they'll come for me, too. Thank you so much for joining me this evening for what will be the first of several Campfire Sessions here on Tapes of Trepidation. I hope you had as much fun as I did sitting around the campfire while these stories were shared. The stories featured on this edition in order were A Campfire Story, written by HopelessNightOwl. A Night in the Forest, written by Alparos-Lilah. I apologize if I'm butchering that. Guest narration for this story was by Kai Fayden. You can check out Kai's channel, Poltergeist, through the link in the show notes. And the final story featured, The Wendigo's Call, was written by PageTurner627, which was originally posted on Reddit Scary Stories and is narrated with author's permission. Check out PageTurner627's Reddit account. They have a lot of fantastic stories and are a really great writer. The Tapes of Trepidation theme and the wonderful acoustic version you're currently hearing was written and performed by JM Scherf. If you need any custom music or stock music, JM is the man and is awesome to work with. You'll find a link to all his content in the show notes. All logos, banners, overlays, including the brand new Campfire Sessions overlay, were done by the incredible Jason Rees from Jaybird Digital Arts. I've known Jason for nearly 10 years, and he's done tons of work for me. If you need any kind of graphic design work, Jason is your guy. You'll find a link to contact him in the show notes. If you enjoyed what you heard, consider subscribing, leaving a rating, and following Tapes of Trepidation on social media. You can find a link tree in the show notes. And be sure to tell your friends. Word of mouth is extremely helpful to a podcast like this one. And if for some reason you're new here with the Campfire Sessions, be sure to check out the rest of the content here on Tapes of Trepidation, as things are normally done a little differently. And if you feel like supporting the show a little more, consider joining the Tapes of Trepidation Patreon. With as little as $5 a month, you can gain access to monthly bonus short story narrations, the weekly behind-the-scenes podcast within the archive, a weekly shout-out, and more at higher tiers. So to come, join us, and become trapped within the archive. Just like my current patrons, Doozer Pin Dan, Ronan Kumori, Eric Phones, Patrick Stewart, Madam Strangeways, Dr. Torment, Tori, and brand new patron, Queen Cam. Thank you so much for the support, Cam. It truly means the world to me whenever you share kind words about an episode you hear. And now to have your support on Patreon. A big thank you again to all of my Patreon supporters. All content used on Tapes of Trepidation is either original, used with permission, or is available under Creative Commons Share-alike license. All rights reserved unless otherwise stated. Links to all stories and licensing information can be found in the show notes. Now, I think it's best if you head out for the night, as the fire's starting to die out, and you never know what may be lurking nearby in the dark. Hope to see you next time.